What is it about horror and comedy that works so well together? I like to think it's the fact that horror movies are filled with both tension and cliches, and comedy allows us the chance to break that tension and laugh at the cliches. And I would consider myself to be a horror fan. I've been watching horror movies for about as long as I can remember, and one thing that I've really started to come to terms with recently is that my favorite horror movies all have a real strong sense of comedy to them. Movies like Scream, The Cabin in the Woods, and the movie we're covering today, 1987's The Lost Boys, and we're going to be talking about how it came to be, everything that's made it stick with us for decades, and its legacy nearly 40 years later. Welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon. Now, let's talk about some vampires. So the funniest thing about my history with The Lost Boys is that I don't really remember seeing it for the first time, but I do remember hearing about it for the first time. If you've watched any of my other videos, you've probably heard me talk about my mom's influence on my taste in movies, and how it influenced me as a young movie fan. And I remember hearing her talk about The Lost Boys with a friend, and I asked her if it was a Peter Pan movie, because I was obsessed with Spielberg's Hook and thought, hey, maybe it's a Hook sequel I just don't know about. And she responded with, no, it's the scariest vampire movie ever made. So for years as a kid, I thought that The Lost Boys was some absolutely horrifying movie, and then cut to my surprise when I finally see it at age 12 or 13, and it's one of the most kid-friendly R-rated movies that I've ever seen. Though I don't remember first watching this movie, I do remember being blown away by it and thinking it was the most 80s movie ever. Well, the most 80s movie I'd ever seen up to that point. But everything about The Lost Boys just fully worked for me, from the way it looks to the music, and I mean the cast is just absolutely undeniable. Especially Keifer Sutherland as David, the vampire of few words. Well, there is one word he says a lot.
Michael.
This movie is also incredibly important to me as a movie fan because it kind of redeemed Joel Shumacher in my eyes a little bit. Like, I'm a big Batman fan. I even have a Court of Owls tattoo. And especially at the time, I despised Batman and Robin. Now, I think it's kind of a masterclass in camp and the ultimate example of how the word toyetic destroyed movies for a while, but that's a different topic for a different video. However, watching The Lost Boys and learning that this was the same guy that made Batman and Robin did kind of break my brain. It was one of the first times I understood that just because a director makes a bad movie, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad director. Because there are a ton of Schumacher movies that I absolutely love, and The Lost Boys is at the very top of that list. And before we go any further, just a quick reminder that if you're enjoying this video so far, to like and subscribe. Also, if it means anything to you, I don't use any AI in the making of my videos. Now, let's dive into how The Lost Boys came to be. And our story begins with Janice Fisher and James Jeremias. The story goes that Jeremias had just finished reading Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, and the Claudia character, being eternally trapped in the body of a child, had his brain asking the very silly question: if Peter Pan is eternally a child, can fly, and seemingly only comes out at night to fly into young girls' rooms, could Peter Pan actually be a vampire? Originally, their script was a lot closer to something like The Goonies, with the vampires in the movie being only 13 or 14 years old, and the Frog Brothers being described as chubby 8-year-old Cub Scouts. Ironically enough, Richard Donner, who actually directed The Goonies, was originally slated to direct The Lost Boys. But after a few rewrites of the script and delays, he was offered the chance to direct Lethal Weapon, which was a go project, so he jumped ship and Joel Shumacher was brought on board to direct. And originally, Shumacher was completely uninterested in the premise and script, until he started thinking about it more, and he came up with the idea of aging up all of the characters to be older teenagers and the Frog Brothers and Sam to be 13 or 14. So once Shumacher realized he wanted to really change the script, he asked for some rewrites, and Jeffrey Boehm was brought on board based on the strength of his script for The Dead Zone and Inner Space. And he was tasked with aging up all of the characters and making it overall more adult, and he was even given the green light to go for an R rating. As for the casting of the movie, I mean, the cast is just perfect. Jason Patric, who plays Michael, actually turned the movie down multiple times, and he was really only won over once Joel Shumacher told him that he wanted creative input from the cast on how to shape the script. And according to Sutherland, Patric did end up playing a big part in how the movie was shaped. And speaking of Sutherland, he was cast off of the strength of his performance in At Close Range, although I have to imagine that he and Corey Feldman's performances in Stand By Me helped both of them land their roles as well. I mean, that and Feldman had already been in The Goonies, directed by Richard Donner just a year earlier. And even though Richard Donner didn't direct the movie, he did end up staying on as an executive producer. I think the most surprising bit of casting in the movie is Diane Wiest, mostly because she had just won an Oscar for the movie Hannah and Her Sisters earlier in the year, and it's pretty cool that she decided to follow up her Oscar-winning performance with a teen vampire horror comedy. So with the cast locked in, filming for The Lost Boys began on June 2nd, 1986, and filming lasted just 3 weeks, filming primarily in Santa Cruz, California for the exterior shots before moving to sound stages at Warner Brothers for the interior stuff. Actually, Grandpa's house that the family moves into is a pretty crazy story. They actually shot the exterior of the house at Pogo Nip Clubhouse in Pogo Nip Park, but they completely recreated both the exterior and interior of the house on a soundstage at Warner Brothers, and they did a really excellent job of recreating it. To me, it is completely seamless. And on July 31st, 1987, The Lost Boys was released into theaters, and on its opening weekend, it made $5.2 million against its $8.5 million budget, and it placed second at the box office behind the first Timothy Dalton-led James Bond movie, The Living Daylights. And it would go on to make a worldwide total of $32.5 million, making it a giant success for everyone involved. And now that we know how the movie came to be, I think it's time that we dive deep into everything that makes it awesome. And if you've never seen The Lost Boys before, here is your one and only spoiler warning.
Come with us, Michael.
Now, The Lost Boys opens with actually one of the most iconic aspects of the movie, the song Cry Little Sister by Gerard McMahon, which he wrote after reading the script. He didn't even get to see the final movie until his song was completely done. And look, this song rocks and is on my Halloween playlist, and it should be on your Halloween playlist as well. Now, the opening scene on the boardwalk with Sutherland's David and his boys does a great job setting up the tone of the movie immediately as well. We get to see that these boys like to cause trouble and that they have a reputation for it, being kicked off of the boardwalk almost immediately. The movie also loudly announces that this is going to be an incredibly good-looking movie because cinematographer Michael Chapman goes all out immediately. Like, I love that there's all of this haze throughout this opening that's backlit by all of the neon lights of the boardwalk. It's just absolutely beautiful. And if you don't know, Michael Chapman happens to be the guy who shot Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, among many, many other movies. But I feel like this movie almost looks like the California version of Taxi Driver. Instead of neon-lit rainy New York, we've got hazy neon-lit Santa Cruz. Now that we've had David and the boys teased out, the movie introduces us to our main characters, the Emerson family, with the great Diane Wiest as Lucy, Corey Haim as Sam, and Jason Patric as Michael. I actually really love the dynamics of the family that get set up here. We see that Lucy is a kind and caring mom, and that Sam and Michael have a great brotherly relationship. We're also introduced to Bernard Hughes as Grandpa, who's playing dead as the family arrives to move in. The way this scene is written is just top-notch as well. Grandpa and Lucy reveal through conversation that she's, quote,
"You're the only woman I ever knew didn't improve her situation by getting divorced."
And that's why she and the boys have come to live with him. And if you don't love Bernard Hughes as Grandpa, you're just wrong because he's so kooky and fun. My personal favorite bit is that he doesn't own a TV, but he loves his TV guide because...
Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
We're also shown his taxidermy workshop, which will come into play in the final showdown of the movie, but more on that in a bit. Later that night, Sam and Michael head down to the boardwalk for what looks like a summer concert series, and let's just say it, this is another one of the most iconic scenes of the movie because we've got Timmy Capello as what I'm going to refer to as the sexy sax man, and my guy is just glistening in oil and singing And the sequence just rocks. The concert is also where Michael first sees and instantly falls in love with Jamie Gertz's Star. Actually, she was cast at the insistence of Jason Patric because the two had just worked together on 1986's Solar Babies. So anyway, Michael goes off chasing Star, and Sam heads to the comic book shop and meets the Frog Brothers, Edgar and Alan, played by Feldman and Jameson Newlander, respectively. And yes, their names are in homage to Edgar Allan Poe. But Sam basically uses this opportunity to act like a big shot and show off his golden age comic book knowledge. And I just have to say this, while Batman number 14 may be a rare book, there are certainly more than 4 of them in existence. I'm really not sure why Shumacher threw that line in the movie. Their meeting is also intercut with footage of Lucy walking down the boardwalk and looking for a job before helping a lost little boy and meeting Max, who she instantly has a connection with, and he offers her a job working at his video store. The next morning, we get one of my favorite jokes in the entire movie, with Sam having asked Grandpa to take him into town. So they get into Grandpa's car, he starts it, then turns it off and gets out and says,
"It's as close to town as I like to get."
Really foreshadowing that Grandpa knows all about the vampire infestation in Santa Carla. Sam somehow makes it into town anyway and goes right back to the comic shop to talk to the Frog Brothers, and they hand him a copy of Vampires Everywhere and tell him to think of it as a survival manual, and telling him that they're actually vampire hunters and he should pray that he never needs to call them. I've always just loved this interaction. Like, both Sam and the Frog Brothers are so full of and sure of themselves, which is just great because they'll all end up working together in like 15 minutes anyway. That night, Michael goes back to the boardwalk hoping to find and impress Star. He even buys a leather jacket just for the occasion. He quickly finds her and the two do hit it off, but then David shows up and really just asserts his dominance here. But David and the boys actually invite Michael to go for a ride with them, and it's just an awesome sequence. It's so 80s. The whole thing is scored to Lou Gramm's Lost in the Shadows, and it just rocks right up until Michael almost drives off a cliff, causing him to freak out and try to fight David, until David asks him,
"How far are you willing to go, Michael?"
Which leads to the group taking Michael back to their home, which is a hotel that was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake, and we get the iconic moments of David turning rice into maggots and noodles into worms before convincing Michael to drink what he thinks is wine but is actually blood, which I think is what turns Michael into a half vampire. Honestly, I've never been super clear on his transformation, because after he drinks the blood, they go up to some train tracks and we get yet another iconic moment with all of the boys dangling from the tracks as a train goes by overhead. And fun fact, the order with which the vampires fall here is the order in which they die throughout the movie. Now, the next afternoon, Sam wakes Michael up, and Michael finds he's incredibly sensitive to the sunlight, and their mom asks Michael to watch Sam so she can go on a date with Max. And later that night, as Sam is taking a bath, Michael tries to drink some milk, only to find it hurts to do so, and then his vampire brain kicks in and he tries to attack his younger brother. But luckily, Sam's dog Nanook is there to stop him. In the aftermath, as Sam figures out what's going on, he says one of my favorite lines in the entire movie.
"My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Will you wait till mom finds out, buddy?"
And then he goes to call the Frog Brothers to ask for their advice, which is of course to just kill Michael and get it over with. However, at this point, Michael starts flying uncontrollably and doesn't know what to do, and it scares Sam, who calls their mom to tell on Michael for being a vampire, which is just very funny to me as someone that grew up with brothers. She even rushes home, but as she does, Michael convinces Sam that he's not a full vampire and he's still his brother. So when Lucy does arrive home, she's just pissed that Sam ruined her date and that there's spilled milk in the kitchen. We even get this great little bit of Laddie being featured on the milk carton. Michael then sneaks back to the vampire's hideout, only to find that they're all out and Star is the only one there, and the two finally get their chance to hook up. The next morning, Lucy goes to bring a bottle of apology wine to Max, only to be attacked by his dog Thorn, right as Sammy just so happens to be reading about the Hounds of Hell in his Vampires Everywhere comic book, which causes him to once again go and see the Frog Brothers, and they make a plan to test Max and see if he might be the head vampire, which honestly, it's a pretty solid plan. Unfortunately, that night as Max arrives, who should meet him at the door but Michael, who officially invites Max in, you know, like an idiot. And the dinner party with Max is another iconic scene from this movie, from the Frog Brothers showing up uninvited to Max putting minced garlic onto his spaghetti thinking it's Parmesan cheese, and of course the surprised face he makes when they put a mirror in front of his face. Understandably, Max is a little offended and decides wants to end the evening early, but he's still into Lucy, and the two reschedule their date once again. One of my favorite parts about Max coming over for dinner is the way that Grandpa hides in his workshop and closes the door as soon as he sees that the guest is Max. Again, foreshadowing that Grandpa might know a little bit more about what's going on here than he lets on. We then cut to Michael finding David and the boys on the boardwalk and shouting about wanting to find Star, but David tells him they need to go somewhere first, and here's where it is finally fully revealed that David and the boys are vampires. The Lost Boys is also the first time that the idea of vamping out really became a thing, with the colored contact lenses, makeup, and longer nails, which I just think is kind of cool. And the vampires go and feed on an unsuspecting group of beach partiers, and now Michael finally fully understands what they are and what he now is. And David saying,
"You'll never grow old, Michael. And you'll never die. But you must feed."
is one of the most iconic lines in the movie, but even still, Michael refuses to engage and kill to feed. Now, the next morning, Michael, Sammy, and the Frog Brothers borrow Grandpa's car and head to the vampire hideout to save Star and Laddie. Michael quickly finds and saves both of them, but Sammy and the Frog Brothers can't help themselves and have to travel further into the hideout to try and kill the head vampire. But of course, these idiots don't know who the head vampire is, so they just stake the first one they reach, which happens to be Bill S. Preston Esquire himself, Alex Winter. And as they stake him, blood just explodes from the wound, covering all of the characters in glittery blood, which I think really was a genius design choice on behalf of the props team. After staking the vampire, they make a break for it, but David is right behind them, even grabbing Sammy's leg, and it looks like he might get him. That is until his arm is dragged into the sunlight and catches on fire. And the shot of David with the single tear rolling down his cheek is so great. This wasn't actually in the script. Sutherland's eyes were just watering because of the contacts he was wearing, but it looked so perfect they decided to keep it in anyway. Once our heroes get out of the hideout, we get this great moment of the Frog Brothers talking about how they failed in the face of danger, and I feel like I haven't quite given enough credit to the Frog Brothers so far in this video, but I do genuinely think they're the funniest characters in the movie. They think they're in a Sylvester Stallone action movie and not a teen-focused horror comedy, and it just rocks. Like, I love the way that they say,
"We don't ride with vampires,"
before being reminded that this is really their only getaway option, and they jump in the car. That night, it's time for the final showdown, but first we get this really great montage of Sammy and the Frog Brothers preparing for battle. Getting holy water from the church during a baptism is my favorite moment, but they also fill up the bathtub with holy water and a bunch of garlic. And as the sun goes down, David and the rest of the boys come out and head to find our heroes, and the finale of this movie is just awesome. Like, they crank everything up to 11. I especially love the touch that every time a vampire bursts through something, the wind machines are fully cranked up so everything is blowing around them, and all of the vampire deaths are awesome too. From Nanook pushing this one into the bathtub and then the plumbing exploding with blood, to Sammy shooting this one into the stereo.
Death by stereo.
And of course, Michael and David's showdown with the taxidermied antlers is also fantastic. Well, to be honest, I've always kind of found the showdown with Michael and David to be mildly underwhelming. It just feels like it's over immediately, which I get because, as it turns out, David is not the head vampire, which our heroes realize once David is dead and Star and Michael are still vampires. Luckily for everyone, though, this is when Lucy and Max show up, and Max reveals he is in fact the head vampire, and that his plan was to turn Michael and Sammy and then force Lucy to turn as well and be mother to his boys. Very Peter Pan coded, right? Unfortunately, Max is just a lot stronger than David, and our heroes are unable to take him out like they did the other vampires. Luckily, Grandpa arrives just in the nick of time to save the day, crashing through his own front room and impaling Max with a giant fence post, causing him to explode into a giant ball of fire. And I've always loved that the movie ends with Grandpa finally saying,
One thing about living in Santa Carla I never could stomach. All the damn vampires.
So, nearly 40 years later, what is the legacy of The Lost Boys? Well, I think it's one of the most iconic teen horror movies of the 80s. Sure, it didn't spawn a franchise the way a lot of other 80s horror movies did, but I honestly think that that's for the best. One of the lasting legacies of this movie is sort of the lasting legacy of the late Joel Shumacher, who was an out and proud gay man for his entire career, because this movie is just dripping in homoeroticism. But seriously, The Lost Boys is a movie that I think still looms large among movie fans. I mean, every year Santa Cruz does a free public screening on the boardwalk just to celebrate the movie's cultural impact on the town. I also mentioned earlier that this movie revolutionized the premise of vamping out, something that would go on to be a huge influence to another great teen horror franchise, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And ironically enough, the Buffy movie happened to also star Keifer Sutherland's father, Donald, in a lead role. There were also a couple of direct-to-DVD sequels produced in the late 2000s, but Corey Feldman was the only cast member to return in any real way. I've never seen them, but I've also never really heard anyone say anything good about them either. And sadly, I doubt we'll ever get a proper theatrical sequel to this movie, as tragically both Corey Haim and Joel Shumacher have passed away, and I think you'd need both of them to make a real legacy sequel. But also, even if they were both still alive, I don't think I ever need to see a sequel to The Lost Boys. It's a pretty perfect movie, and it stands on its own just fine. But let me know in the comments, did you guys see the direct-to-DVD sequels? Do you want to see more sequels? What's your favorite one-liner from The Lost Boys? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. It truly means the world, and a special thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. You all make these videos possible. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there's a link in the description below. Patrons get early, ad-free access to videos, access to an exclusive Discord server, and they get to help me choose what movies to cover on the channel. Just another reminder that Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and your support means a lot. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We release new videos covering all of your childhood favorites every Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.